What is up, everyone? We got another UFC Fight Night card to break down from a DraftKings DFS perspective. So, we got another Apex card headlined by Amanda Ribas versus Rose Namajunas. And we have 13 fights, a mix of UFC debuts, as well as many low-level fights. So, I think that these lines can potentially be very fragile, have a lot of variance, but nonetheless, we're going to try to break this down by the metrics and a little bit of my own opinion and takes and see if we can find the good plays given the salaries. So that without further ado, let's go to the first fight of the night. We got Muhammad Usman versus Mick Parkin. So relatively low level heavyweight fight. Muhammad Usman's a physical specimen. He's a big, strong guy. His brother is obviously Kamaru Usman, the former dominant welterweight champion. Mick Parkin, I don't have a good read on him yet. He's looked like a fighting heavyweight striker from what I've seen. He has some takedowns, but yeah, I think this fight line is probably decent. It's a relatively 50-50 fight in my opinion. And I think it's going to be a sloppy heavyweight fight that you probably want to avoid on DraftKings. And Mick Parkin 8.4K, Usman 7.8K. And yeah, just the ITD lines are not great. I guess if I had to lean to a side for DFS, I would say Usman because he does have some takedowns and he does have heavy hands, although he's not the most accurate striker. But I think this fight is just a dud overall. Then we got Andre Lima versus Igor da Silva. So from what I've heard about Igor da Silva is this guy's a madman. He's going to go after it. He has takedown upside, all that stuff. So I think he's probably going to be a good play, especially at, I believe they have him under a different name on here. Severino, right? Yeah, so 7.2K, I mean, plus 350, somewhere around there would be good to see for an ITD line. And he's well within that, as well as the takedown upside that he has. So I think he's a good play as an underdog. And then on the other side, we have Andre Lima, 9K flat. So hopefully like minus 110. I've heard that he's low volume and pretty much a pure striker. So we're probably going to need minus 110. He's like plus 150. Just not great. So I think he's probably a pass. Then we got Montserrat Rendon versus Darya. So Darya is pretty much a pure striker, decent volume, decent power, and Rendon is, a pretty physical girl in this weight class, and she has some wrestling upside. So I think that Rendon's win condition is going to revolve around some type of grappling game plan. And for Darya, I think you're really going to need a good ITD line to make this a good play, and I just don't think it'll be there. So Darya plus 250, 8.8K. And as a pure striker, I just don't think that's good at all. And then Rendon, pretty much non-existent ITD line, but I do think her win condition is going to revolve around takedowns, and she did put up 90 in her last fight. So I think it's a fringy play at best. I do want to see what ownership is, but it's fringy if not a fade. But I'll call it a fringy play for now, just because of the solid win condition. Jarno Errens versus Steve Nguyen. Okay. So Steve Nguyen's about a minus 160 favorite, and he's 9.4K. So that's pretty much unplayable unless he has the world's best ITD line we've ever seen, which he doesn't. So I can't imagine how you can get to Steve Nguyen with these metrics. And then Jarno Errens, 6.8K, and he's only plus 144. And basically what happened is there was a ton of line movement right after they priced these salaries. So, yeah, he went from a 3-1 favorite all the way to minus 160. So that's why you're seeing this major pricing discrepancy. So, I mean, the problem is that Errens is a guy where fantasy points go to die. So he's just not a very fantasy point friendly fighter. But you kind of have to ignore that. The win value alone, the line value is just too good. I have to call him a good play. He's honestly an elite play, but he just doesn't have good finishing metrics, and he doesn't have good fantasy point output. So that's the only reason why he's only a good play. And I imagine he gets ownership, right? Plus 145, plus 145 at 6.8K. How does he not get owned? So, with that being said, I do think we'll talk about it more on the ownership video on Friday, but I do think it's fadeable just because of, like I said, how low output he is. So we'll see. But for now, I got to call him a good play with those metrics. Cody Gibson, Miles Johns. Miles Johns, 8.2K, and he's minus 150. So you're getting a tiny bit of line value on Miles Johns. And then for him, he can have takedowns. He can also not have takedowns. It kind of depends. He doesn't really have a set win condition in most of his fights. So I want to see like a plus 225, maybe. Yeah, okay. So he's right, plus 250 about without Vig. So I think he's fine along with the line value that he has. And then Cody Gibson, plus 400. But he did have a lot of volume in his last fight. So I don't know. I think it's a fade. I can't trust him to have that exact amount of volume in all of his fights from here on out. So I think it's a Johns or pass, but Johns himself is not the most amazing play. It's okay. Then we got Ricardo Ramos versus Julian Erosa. I love this fight environment. You got Julian Erosa, pretty much never been in the boring fight. He comes forward, throws a lot of volume. And Ricardo Ramos, Julian Erosa, the one weakness he has is he can get finished. He's gotten knocked out in a lot of fights. So I think Julian Erosa can bring the pace, and if he succeeds, he's going to win and put up a lot of points. And if he doesn't, it's because Ramos is probably going to stop him with a knockout. So I do like this fight environment off the bat, but let's take a look at the metrics. So 7.3K, Julian Erosa, so plus 330 or something like that would be good. And he's plus 250, so I think that he's a pretty elite underdog to target. And then Ricardo Ramos, plus 150, 8.9K. On its own, that's really not great, but I just think this fight environment is going to deliver. And so I'm just going to bypass the metrics, even though they're not perfect, and just say both sides of this fight are good. Then we got Kurt Holobaugh versus Trey Ogden. Kurt Holobaugh, he's kind of like a crafty vet, very scrappy dude. He's good on bottom. He's, going to come forward, try his best to win. I mean, of course, but obviously he's going to try to win. But he's a guy I do like, his style. And he's plus 125, 7.7K, so it's about right. And I think as long as his, let's see, what is he? 7.7K, like plus 200 ITD, around there would be good. He's like right there. So I think Holybaugh's a fine play. And then Trey Ogden, plus 375, 8.5K. He does have a bit of takedown upside, but like 84 points? That's just not going to be enough in my opinion. So I think it's a Holobaugh pass spot for me. Okay, then we got Luis Pajuelo versus Fernando Padilla. So I've heard Pajuelo's pretty aggressive. He's going to march forward, throw big strikes. So I imagine he'll look good at 7.5K maybe. Plus 300 ITD would be good. I mean, yeah, he's like plus 250. So I think he's a good underdog to target. And then Padilla, 8.7K. With the context of the slate, I think we might only need like plus 150. He's like plus 160. But I just think with the context of the slate, with so far we're seeing there's a lot of very weak favorites. I think Padilla is one of the stronger favorites on this card for DFS. So I like both sides of this fight. Zalal versus Quarantillo. So Zalal is apparently very durable. Has some takedown upside, but isn't exactly the highest output guy himself. So I don't really know what to make of this fight from a DFS perspective. I know Quarantillo is going to march forward, very high pace, very high volume. So he potentially could do well in a win. But the problem is, I don't think there's going to be any major finishing upside on either side of this fight. And yeah, these lines are just not good at all. 8.6K, 7.6K. But to be honest, plus 120 at 7.6K, that's a decent touch of line value, I think. I don't really have a good read on this fight. What is Quarantillo's 73? I'm going to call it a fade for now, but I want to see what the ownership is like on Friday because that could very well change my opinion, but I think it's a dud for now. Cameron Saaiman, Peyton Talbott. So Talbott is a very high volume guy. Saaiman is, a tough guy himself, very well rounded. So I think this fight is going to operate at a very high pace, despite that it might go to a decision at a high clip. I think you could see, a very high amount of strikes from the winner of this fight, and I think Saaiman out of the two has a bit of takedown upside as well. So let's see the prices though. So Talbot 8.3K minus 150. It's about right. So maybe plus 250. I want to see maybe a bit better than that, but let's see. He's like plus 235 or so. I think that's fine for Talbot. Couple that with the very high volume that I believe he will have in this fight. I think it's a fine play. And then Cameron Saaiman, the non-existent ITD line for this price is tough. So I think I got to call it a fade with the lack of the very strong take. Like he has takedown upside, but it's not strong enough to overcome that bad of a ITD metric, in my opinion. So for now, it's Talbot or pass. Dobson versus Shabazian. So Shabazian 9.1K. I'm gonna want to see minus 110, as always, somewhere around there. He's like plus 110. But I will say, with the context of the slate, like we keep saying, just a lot of these very weak favorites, he does stick out to me as one of the stronger favorites. I think he's fine, even though he's not exactly where I want him to be. And then Dobson plus 400, 7.1K. He has a bit of takedown upside, but I just don't see like the 100-point upside for him. So for now, it's a fade for me. And I think Shabazian is the side. Okay. 2 more fights left. Okay, so then we got a really key fight in the co-main event. Justin Tafa, Carl Williams. So I'm going to oversimplify this, majorly, but you got Justin Tafa, who is, a big heavyweight with heavy hands and a good striker. And Carl Williams, who has very poor striking, but amazing grappling upside. So I think if Tafa wins this fight, it's probably because he stuffs the takedowns and knocks out Williams within a round. And if Williams wins the fight, it's probably because he gets a takedown and immediately just mounts Tafa, lands ground and pound, the fight gets stopped. I think it's really that simple. So I think that both sides of this fight are very strong. I think both of them have 100-point upside. And I'll tell you what, Tafa, 6.9K as only a plus 170 underdog is just, and the fact that he has a great ITD line, a great win condition. I think he's an elite underdog to target. And then Carl Williams plus 160. So that is honestly very poor on paper. But I just think I don't buy it. I think if he wins this fight, it's because he gets on top and just finds a finish. Now, could he? We've seen him lay on top and just get takedowns and just lay there and not do much. Could that happen? Yes, I hope it doesn't. But even if that does happen, he could still get a ton of control time. Land strikes along the way, and he could still go off that way. So I think regardless that Williams is actually an elite target as well, and I love both sides of this fight from a DFS perspective. Then we got the main event: Rose Namajunas versus Amanda Ribas. Oh, okay. So this is interesting because this line, Rose on Monday, went all the way up to about a minus 300 favorite, which was tough because I really wanted to play Ribas. Because here's the thing: Ribas is only 7K. She's got 5 rounds to work with, and in all of her wins, they involve a high pace and they involve takedowns usually. So I was thinking, okay, if Ribas wins, how does she not score? How is she not optimal at 7K? So, and now that she has, the appropriate line value, not value, but it's not negative line value as when it was when Rose was a 3-1 favorite. There's a lot of negative line value on Ribas, but now that the line is back to a reasonable number, I think that Ribas is a good play. And then for Rose, it's a lot tougher because she has the minus 105 ITD line, which is pretty good, 9.2K, along with 5 rounds to work with. But she can be so low volume. I don't think she'll go for takedowns in this matchup. So I think that Rose, I can't call her a fade, but I definitely have a lot more interest in the Ribas side. Because I think Ribas, if she wins, she's going to be optimal at a way higher rate than Rose if she wins, right? Rose can win in a number of different ways and not score enough at 9.2K. But I just don't see many ways that Ribas can win at 7K and not become optimal. So, long story short, I have more interest in the Ribas side, but I can't call Rose a bad play. She's a good play, at least an okay play. So, okay, I think that's it. A lot of rambling in that video. Hopefully that made sense. We have a very weird slate with a lot of low-level fights, a lot of plays, especially the favorites, that don't stick out as being very good plays. I could go through a million underdogs. Like, almost all of these underdogs you can make a case for. So I think this is a very tough slate to really X guys out, and I'm a guy who really loves to X players out when I can, and this slate is going to be tough to do that. So I think this is going to be a very ownership and lineup construction based slate for me. I am not very confident in my pool this week, whereas I usually am. So yeah, here's the player pool. It'll be updated and we'll go over ownership and stuff like that on Friday. But for now, that'll be it. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for the support on the videos, and I will see you guys on Friday.